All right, I think with that, we are going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to have you all join me in welcoming Tina. So just a little bit about Tina. She has been a lover of nature and wildlife, she says, her whole life, but she actually didn't start birding until 2008. But she seems to have really taken to it because she is now the president of the Pomona Valley Audubon Society, which is the local chapter of the Audubon Society for the garden area. And she does all kinds of different programs with them and then also with us. We're very fortunate. So she's worked with us in the past on things like our Family Bird Festival. She's been here for things that go bump in the night, talking about owls and things like that. But she does all sorts of other work around the community. So you might see her around. So you can tell her you went to her webinar today, if you do. But you can get more information about the Pomona Valley Audubon Society and about Tina from their website, which I believe is just Pomona Valley Audubon.org. All right, go for it, Tina.
Well, let's do a little screen share here and hope this works, right? Technology at its finest. All right, let's get this slideshow going. Oops, how about from the first slide? That's probably the best place to start. Okay, wish they all could be California birds. In celebration of Bird Month 2020, the Pomona Valley Audubon Society has a long history of participating in the Botanic Garden's Family Bird Festival, which is held each February and coincides with the Great Backyard Bird Count, which is sponsored by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, Audubon, and Birds Canada. Now, sadly, the pandemic put the festival on hold, and so last year, the garden created an alternative program called Bird Month, which included self-guided programs at the garden, as well as online content such as classes like this. I was honored to be invited to teach an introduction to birding class last year, and I'm delighted to be back again this year to help the garden celebrate Bird Month and to support the garden, especially after the recent devastating windstorm and all the unexpected expenses involved in the cleanup. So I'm happy to be here for a couple different reasons this year, Jennifer. Now, the advertisement for this class started with 3 questions. Did you know that there are 7 species of birds in North America whose names start with California? And did you know that 5 of the 7 can be seen at the Botanic Garden? And so where better to take a class about California birds than the California Botanic Garden? So our objective today is to answer those 3 questions by becoming familiar with the 7 species of birds named California. And we'll talk a little bit about how to identify them, how they live, and where you can find them in the garden and beyond. And when we're done, I hope you'll be able to say, yep, the California Botanic Garden was indeed the perfect place to learn about California birds. I also hope that this class will increase your appreciation for just how unique California is in terms of its variety of bird species and the plant communities that support them. So, since we're talking about birds named California, let's ask the question, what's in a name? I mean, after all, many birds are named for places. For instance, some birds are named after cities, such as the Nashville warbler, the Philadelphia vireo, and probably the better known Baltimore oriole. Birds are named after oceans, like the Pacific loon and the Atlantic puffin. They're named after regions, like the Arctic loon and the neotropic cormorant. Now, I chose those 2 species because both of them have actually been seen nearby at Benelli Regional Park, even though they sound like they have pretty exotic and far-reaching names. Birds are named after continents, including the European starling and the Eurasian collared dove, both of which, by the way, can be found at the garden. Birds are named after countries. Probably the one most familiar to you is the Canada goose, and I've seen them flying over the garden as well. And the Mexican chickadee are a couple of examples. And then, this is a whole nother subject, maybe for a future webinar around the 4th of July or something. There are 18 species of birds whose names start with the word American. So birds are named for all kinds of different things. So I don't want you to think that California is, so special that it's the only state that has a bird named after it. I mean, after all, there are 9 other states that have birds named for them. And these are listed in alphabetical order, so no prejudice to any particular state. So number 1 is the Arizona woodpecker. And then we've got to give partial credit to the Carolina chickadee and the Carolina wren. not full state names, but close enough. There's the Connecticut warbler, the Florida scrubjay, the Kentucky warbler, the Louisiana water thrush, the Tennessee warbler, the Mississippi kite, and the Virginia rail. But notice that each of these states only has one bird named after it. And California has 7 different species named California. So there we go. So who are the 7 birds named California? They are the California quail, the California scrubjay, the California thrasher, the California towee, the California gull, the California Nat Catcher, and the California condor. Now, California is the state with the highest residential population in the US. And per the 2020 census, that was over 39 million people. And we're also the 3rd largest state by area, just under Texas and Alaska. Because we have such a large area, we're fortunate to also have a very diverse range of habitats in the state of California, which attract a great variety of wildlife, especially birds. Now, Southern California is especially unique because we have the ability to spend time in the mountains and on the beach all in the same day. And perhaps you've heard that old expression, where else in the world can you go skiing and surfing on the same day? Well, that's one of the reasons why Los Angeles County is actually the birdiest county in the US. From the deserts to the mountains to the beach and everything in between, that variation in habitat equals the greatest variety of bird species as well. So it only seems appropriate today to start our class with our state bird, the California quail. The California quail's call is a common sound of the chaparral and other brushy habitats in California and the Northwest. And it sounds like someone saying the word Chicago, Chicago, Chicago. The California quail can be seen and heard at the Botanic Garden. In addition to their well-known Chicago call, they also make soft clucking sounds that are used as contact calls between members of the covey or between parents and their chicks. Now, before we play the recording, let me just say a few words about these recordings. Some of them may actually run almost up to a minute in length. And my goal here is to let you hear the full spectrum of the songs and calls as they occur, with their cadences and timing between the calls, all a little bit different depending on the situation. So sit back, relax, and listen. Listen for variations in the call. Is it full and complete or is it partial? Can you hear more than one voice? In other words, are there 2 or more birds vocalizing at the same time? And if you're really good at birding by ear, then I challenge you to identify the birds that are in the backgrounds of these recordings. Okay, here we go. Let's listen to the call of the California quail. All right. How many different quail did you hear in that recording? Did anybody catch the spotted towee in the background? All right. The California, yeah, she's going to say that when I rotate through the slides. So we just might have to listen to her say that a couple of times as we go through this. The California quail is a plump, short-legged game bird, and the males have a distinctive black head plume that is comma-shaped and comes right out of the top of their head in a forward fashion. Also look for the dramatic black and white markings on their face and the dark black chin. And the belly features black and white scale-like markings and has a chestnut patch in the middle of the belly. The neck has fine black and white markings, and the females are brownish gray on the neck and face and lack those strong black and white markings. Here's a photo of a female on the left. She also lacks that comma-shaped plume on the top of her head, and she's with a little chick. The California quail are about 10 inches in length, have a wingspan of about 14 inches. They're mainly a seed eater. They also eat leaves and flowers and catkins and grain of plants like manzanita and poison oak, their berries especially, and acorns. During breeding season, they will also eat invertebrates like caterpillars, beetles, mites, millipedes, and snails for that extra protein that they need during the breeding season to be successful. And speaking of the breeding season, California quails mate for life. They nest on the ground, laying up to 14 eggs, but other females may add eggs to a single nest in a behavior known as egg dumping and bringing those totals up to 28 eggs in a single nest. Incubation is 3 weeks, and the male feeds and protects the female while she incubates the eggs. Once hatched, the chicks leave the nest and follow their mother to a food source while she protects them from predators. Now, one of the ways that she does this is what's known as the broken wing diversion display. The mom will signal to her chicks to run and hide, and then she will feign having a broken wing so that the predator is distracted by her distress and never sees which ways the baby chicks go to hide. And typically the predator will then make a move towards the feigned injured mother bird, only to have her fly out of its grasp at the last minute. And the chicks stay silent and hidden until the predator leaves and mom signals the all clear. Several California quail broods may mix after hatching, creating a nursery of chicks. And then all the parents care for all the young. Adults that raise their young this way tend to live longer than adults that don't. I took these photographs out at the North Etiwanda Preserve. I got lucky enough to hear that soft clucking sound of the parent signaling or calling to their chicks. Then Papa Bird was up here on the rock with a couple of the babies. And eventually they made their way across the road. But the parents had to go across the road, stand on an opposite rock, and call the children, encouraging them. And unfortunately, I did not get a shot of the babies jumping off this rock, but it is one of my favorite quail encounter moments. Now, it was actually the Audubon Society that selected the California Valley quail as an appropriate symbol of California. The bird was widely distributed and well known, both for its hardiness and its adaptability. So apparently it was this bird's resourceful nature that intrigued the Audubon Society, and they recommended its adoption as the official state bird to the California legislature. And the state of California passed Assembly Bill 776 on June 12, 1931, which stated the California Valley quail is hereby designated and adopted as the official bird and avifaunal emblem of the state of California. Now, California does not share the California quail as a state bird with any other state. It is ours alone. Some birds are so popular and so widely distributed that several states have the same species as their state bird. So just for fun, this will be your homework assignment now. Just for fun, I want you to Google state birds and look at cardinals, mockingbirds, meadowlarks, and robins, and you'll see just how many states share those species as their state bird. Now, quail are absolutely beautiful in flight as well, as you can see on this photograph on the right, and they gather in flocks which are known as coveys and can number up to several dozen during the non-breeding season. So where can we find the California quail? Besides the California Botanic Garden, of course. Looking at its range map, we see that the bird actually lives in several states besides California, as well as in Baja California and Mexico. They are associated with coastal sage, chaparral, and other brushy habitats where it can escape from predators. Now, the California quail can also be confused with two other quail species that live here in California, the Gambel's quail and the mountain quail. The Gambel's quail lives in the deserts, mostly east of the normal range of the California quail, with very little overlap. Now, here's some field marks to look for. The male's Gambel quail has a buffy, almost white belly versus the darker scaled belly with that chestnut spot of the California quail. Also, the red crown on a Gambel's quail tends to be a little bit bigger and a little bit brighter in color. The first noticeable field mark of the mountain quail is this unique head plume. Both sexes of the mountain quail have this long, slender plume that comes straight off the top of their head, unlike the short, black comma-shaped one off of the California and Gambel's quails. Mountain quail also have thick, white vertical lines against their chestnut sides, and that's quite different than the fine streaks on these other two quail. As the name implies, they are usually found in the mountains, typically from 2,000 to 10,000 feet in elevation. So let's wrap up the California quail with a couple of fun facts. Did you know that the California quail's head plume, or top knot, which looks like a single feather, is actually a cluster of 6 overlapping feathers? And did you know that the California quail is a movie star? The bird has had several roles in Walt Disney movies, including the classic film Bambi. All right. Before we go to bird number 2, are there any questions, Jennifer?
We actually do have a question. Yeah, it just came in. So does the California quail overlap in its habitat with either the Gambel's or the mountain quail? Like, would you
Yes.
see them in the same place, or would they be in different places?
Now, I did mention that there is some overlap in the range between the California quail and the Gambel's quail, but typically the only quail you see on the coast is the California quail. But I got fooled. Gosh, it was the weekend everything shut down. We had a field trip to Anza Borrego State Park. That's definitely desert habitat. And we saw a quail and it was like, oh, good, Gambel's quail. Nope, it was a California quail. So, and then also there's a little bit of overlap in their elevations as well. So that's why I wanted to point out these field markings, because you can't judge it just based on where you are. There is some overlap in the range and habitat.
Neat. All right.
And Jennifer, and I was going to say that when you left and came back, you lost your name on your Zoom box.
Oh, I should change it back again. Thank you.
There you go. All right. Okay, let's go to our next bird. Bird number 2 is the California scrub jay, and this is the western cousin of the well-known blue jay found east of the Rocky Mountains. Its song is not what I would call pretty, but I'll bet you recognize it right away. It can be heard in the Botanic Garden or maybe even your own backyard. Keep in mind that western scrub jays, the western scrub jay was split in 2016 into 2 species, the California scrub jay and the woodhouse scrub jay, which lives in the deserts and the mountains to the east of us. Now, this recording was made before 2016, and so the announcer uses the old name of western scrub jay, but trust me, this is a California scrub jay. All right, here we go. Western scrub jay. Yeah. All right, the California scrub jay combines a beautiful deep azure blue with clean white underparts and a soft gray brown on its back. It's very, very similar to the woodhouse scrub jay. After all, they were considered the same species just a few years ago, but the California scrub jay is a brighter blue and has more contrast in its color. Scrub jays are about 11.5 inches long and have about a 15-inch wingspan. I took this photograph in my backyard during the first spring of the pandemic when we had more time to hang out and take pictures. They eat mostly insects and fruit during the spring and summer and switch to nuts and seeds during the winter and fall, especially acorns. Now, like me, you may have an unwanted oak tree growing somewhere in your yard because a scrub jay was nice enough to plant the tree there for you. Now, California scrub jays are very fond of peanuts, suet, and sunflower seeds at feeders. And if you have dense shrubs or small trees in your yards, a pair might even build a nest. So this is possibly even the same jay from the previous picture on the suet feeder in our backyard. Mated pairs tend to stay together throughout the year, and typically stay together for several years. Their nests are built relatively low, only 6 to 14 feet off the ground, and they're often in an oak tree, a laurel sumac, bay, madrone, poison oak, or other similar California trees. This one was photographed at the Botanic Garden as part of last year's Bird Month photo contest. So where do we find them besides the garden in our own backyards? Well, these birds are a fixture of dry shrublands, oak woodlands, and backyards from Washington State clear south to Baja California. The juveniles are much more gray-brown overall while they're waiting for their beautiful feathers to come in. And California scrub jays, like many members of the crow and jay family, which is known as the corvid family, not COVID, but corvid, they're known for having a mischievous streak. They've been caught stealing acorns from acorn woodpecker caches, and some even steal acorns from other jays after they've watched them hide their acorns. So when these birds go to bury or hide their acorns, watch their behavior. They will check very carefully to make sure that there are no other jays in the area that are watching. Now, here's a fun fact. If you see a California scrub jay standing on the back of a mule deer, what it's doing is it's eating ticks and parasites off of that deer, much like the ox pickers and similar behaviors that we see on the large grazing animals in Africa. The deer seem to appreciate the help too, and they will often stand still and hold their ears upright, giving the jays access to their ears. Now, there are 3 other jays in California that look like the California scrub jay. The closest, of course, is the Woodhouse's scrub jay. And if you look closely, there is a little bit of an intriguing difference between the scrub jay and its close relative, the woodhouse. The scrub jay's bill is very stout, and it has a hook on the end or the tip of the bill. And what this does is it gives it extra power and grip as it hammers open acorns that it harvests throughout its oak woodland habitat. By comparison, the woodhouse's bill is a little bit finer and a little bit thinner, and it's a little bit more pointed, and that allows it to nimbly reach inside of pinyon pine cones and pull out the pine nuts inside. Now, another way to compare a couple of the birds here is that the California scrub jay and the woodhouse scrub jay have a rounded, crestless head, very dramatically different than our Steller's jay over here on the side. And pinyon jays, well, they're much duller in color. And like most desert and Great Basin animals, their coloration is duller to help them blend in with their habitat. Both the Stellers and the pinyon jays are residents of higher elevations, but there is a little bit of habitat. You can experience some of this habitat overlap. It ranges just by driving up Mount Baldy Road and looking out the window, and you might see both the California scrub jay and the Steller's jay in the same location. All right, bird number 3 is a long-tailed, very lanky songbird with a deeply curved bill. This is the California thrasher. And the thrasher is a key species of the California chaparral, and it can be seen and heard at the Botanic Garden. This is a relative of the mockingbirds and is an exuberant singer. And both the males and the females sing from the tops of shrubs, sometimes even singing a duet. Like its mockingbird relative, the California thrasher incorporates imitations of other bird songs into its own, especially those that are found in the chaparral, species such as California quail, wren tit, California scrub jay, Bewick's wren, Nuttall's woodpecker, spotted towhee, and lesser goldfinch. And all of these birds can be seen at the Botanic Garden. I love hearing the song of the California thrasher. So let's listen and see if you hear any parts of other bird songs that are being blended into his song.
California Thrasher.
California thrashers. California thrashers are the largest of the 7 species of thrashers and measure about a foot long and have a wingspan of just over 12 inches. The bird on the left and the bird in the previous frame were both photographed at the California Botanic Garden. Thrashers are fairly common, but can sometimes be difficult to see because they hang out in pretty dense chaparral habitat. So the early morning is often the best time to see them, but they do sing at different times of the day. And so one of the best ways to spot them is to listen for their song, which is made up mostly of double phrases. And then that often gives away their location. Then you want to look up and see them perched on vegetation, like in these 2 photographs. When you hear them singing, look up on top of shrubs and even fence lines. I've got a great picture of one on the fence line outside the cultivator garden at the Botanic Garden. And when they're foraging and they're disturbed by an intruder, you'll often see them running up with their tail held up at an angle, somewhat like a roadrunner. The California thrasher is pretty exclusive to California and Baja California, and they are the only thrasher that is found along the coast. California thrashers require copious amounts of leaf litter under their shrubby brush habitats. They forage by sweeping their bill through the leaf litter and looking for prey, which is seized with a quick pounce. They watch the ground for movement and will often excavate food by probing with their bill and also doing what's known as gaping. That's where they put their closed bill into the ground and then open it to create a hole to find their prey. They eat larval and adult forms of ground-loving beetles, earwigs, isopods, both sow-bugs and roly-polies, spiders, moths, ants, wasps, and even bees. As the fruit ripens in late summer and the insects become scarcer, the diet will include more berries, including those of many plants that you know from the Botanic Garden, like toyon, elderberry, blackberry, manzanita, laurel sumac, mistletoe, and poison oak. The California thrashers form long-term pair bonds, and typically they raise 2 broods of young per year in a nest that is set about 7 feet off the ground in dense shrubbery. The female lays 1 to 6 light blue eggs with dark splotches and spots. Now, there are 3 other members of the thrasher family that can be confused with the California thrasher: the crystal thrasher, the curve-billed, and the Lecants. Crystal thrashers are grayer overall, although in this photo, this bird is pretty gray, but they are grayer instead of the brown California thrasher. The crystals have a curved bill very similar, but they notice this really dark, distinguished mustache that they have. The California the California thrasher definitely lacks that mustache. Now, the crystal thrasher is a little hard to see because this is a small photo. They also have a yellow eye, and that's quite distinct from the California thrasher's dark eye. Same with the curve-billed. It has a yellow eye, which is one of the major things that distinguishes these 2 birds. But also look at the size and the curve of the bill. You'll see that it's much smaller and less curved than the California thrasher. And the curve-billed thrasher also has spotting on its belly, which the California thrasher does not. And last is the Lecants. And the Lecants thrasher, well, it just looks like a desert bird. They are a pale sandy gray in color versus the darker brown color of the California thrasher. All right, let's end on a fun fact about California thrashers. They bear a striking resemblance to many species of birds that use similar habitats around the world, such as the scimitar babblers of Asia and the earth creepers of South America. These species all forage on the ground for insects, all using their long curved bills. Yet none of these groups is closely related to one another. This phenomenon, in which species evolve similar traits in response to similar conditions, is called convergent evolution. Any more questions, Jennifer?
I think we're good for right now. Thank you for asking.
Okay.
If anybody has any, you're welcome. I'll just remind you that you can drop them either in the chat or the Q&A.
Super duper. We'll take a look at bird number 4. Bird number 4 is the California towee. If you live in California, there's a very good chance you can see a towee on a walk around your neighborhood, or maybe even right in your own backyard. They're found at the garden, of course, and you want to listen for a loud, sharp, metallic chip sound. and then scan nearby shrubs, or more importantly, the ground below the shrubs, to look for the California towhee. And they also enjoy perches out exposed, like on this fence post in this photograph here. So let's listen to the California towhee.
California towhee. California.
There we go. All right, how many of you noticed the California quail and the California thrasher in the background of that recording? Few birds are as overall plain and matte brown as the California towhee. The brown is subtly accented with rust colors under their tail, which shows pretty good in this picture. And they also have just a touch of that rust on their faces. The California towhee is about 8 to 10 inches long, with a wingspan of a little over 11 inches. Towies are the largest members of the sparrow family and are most often seen on the ground, foraging amongst leaf litter by scratching away with both feet. They eat primarily seeds and insects, but also berries like that of poison oak. Because towies are ground feeders, you can encourage them to your yard by spreading seed on the ground or in a tray versus a typical hung bird feeder. Now, your first encounter with a California towhee may be prompted by a tireless tapping that you hear at your window or your car mirror. It is the habit of these birds to challenge their reflections. Another clue that you've got towies around is that your car mirrors and windowsills will be covered with bird droppings. A good sign that a California towhee has become obsessed with chasing off its reflection and will return frequently to that spot. Covering your window on the outside or your car mirror to remove the reflection will help keep those things cleaner. I took these photographs in the parking lot at Benelli Park way back in 2012, not thinking I would ever use them for a class. And I was so happy to be able to go back and find them because they were just perfect for today's webinar. California towies are residents of coastal and foothill chaparral from Oregon all the way south to Baja California in Mexico. They typically build their nests in a low fork, usually 3 to 12 feet high, in a shrub or a small tree. Common species include California live oaks, ceanothus, coffeeberry, poison oak, willow, eucalyptus, and many ornamental shrubs and trees. I think the last California towhee nest in our yard was actually built in a red hibiscus bush. The female builds the nest while the male watches. She then lays 2 to 5 eggs that are pale blue or cream in color with partial spots and blotches of darker colors. They produce 1 to 3 broods per season. And unlike many species, the juveniles actually look very much like the adults. I think that is partly because the adults are just so plain brown. An isolated subspecies of the California towhee that lives in the Inyo Mountains of Eastern California is down to fewer than 200 individuals and is listed as federally threatened. Habitat destruction is the bird's main threat, and this is due in part to excessive browsing or overgrazing by cattle and horses, but also, get this, by feral burros. Yeah, these wild donkeys are actually destroying the habitat for this one little subspecies of the California towhee. Now, taxonomists used to consider the California towhee and its almost identical cousin, the canyon towhee, as the same species, and it was called the brown towhee. Now, canyon towies are only found in eastern Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and Mexico. There are several species, I'm sorry, there's one species that lives between the coastal California towhee and the more inland canyon towhee, and that's the one here on the bottom. That's the Abert's towhee. Now you can see that it looks quite different than the other two because it has the striking black face and some accents on the wing feathers that are more interesting, if you will, than either the California or the canyon towhee. But actually, evidence suggests that this Abert's towhee may be the California towhee's most close relative, even though these two look so much alike. On the far right is another species of towhee that you can see at the Botanic Garden and possibly in your own backyard. And this is the very differently colored, rather dramatic spotted towhee, one of my favorites, but not named California, so we're not going to talk about him today. All right, bird number 5 is the California gull. And it's the last of our 7 species that can be seen from the Botanic Garden. They are a medium-sized gull with a gray back and a white head. The adults have yellow legs, which you can just barely see above the water here. And they have both a black and red mark on the tip of their bill. Now, gulls in general are often thought of as being coastal birds, thus the expression seagulls, but that's not very accurate because lots of birds, not all gulls live at the beach. California gulls are very common inland, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment, but they can be occasionally seen flying over the garden. After all, Claremont is not exactly, beachfront property. And so the reason we see them inland is because of this characteristic of the California gull to hang out more inland. In this photo, we have 2 adults. They're both in breeding plumage, which includes this bright red skin around the eye and the bright red in the corner of the mouth, which is called the gape. You'll probably recognize the sound of these birds. And gulls of all species are very challenging to identify because they look very different during non-breeding season. And it takes 3 years, those first 3 years of their lives, while they're gradually getting their adult plumage, they can look very, very different. And take a look at these photos and I think you'll agree. This in the middle is a non-breeding adult California gull. Same bird as on the previous picture. But on top, we also have 2 phases of their juvenile plumage. On the bottom, what they look like in their first winter when they're just starting to get a little bit of gray on their back, and their second winter when the gray is actually starting to come in pretty good. Then there's the third winter, and then finally the adult plumage. So I think you'll agree that when we're looking at the identification of gulls, it's especially challenging because of all these different plumages that they exhibit. So believe it or not, yes, all these birds on this page are indeed the same species. And again, here's another adult in breeding plumage for comparison. And the California gull, like most gulls, are opportunistic feeders, and they will eat anything that they can catch or scavenge. You'll spot them in pastures, scrublands, garbage dumps, and parking lots, and often seen on playing fields at parks and schools. And they'll be eating anything that they can find, from mayflies to garbage and everything in between. Now they breed on inland, on islands and levees in lakes and rivers throughout the inland west. And in the winter, they head to the coast and they cruise up and down the shoreline with other gulls. So when they're found inland on the shores of salty lakes, like the Great Salt Lake, or like in this photo, Owens Lake in the Eastern Sierra, they have developed an odd foraging strategy for catching alkali, or what are also known as brine flies. The flies tend to congregate on the shores of these salty lakes, and the gulls will start at one end of a huge raft of flies, and they will run through them with their head down and their mouth wide open, just snapping them up along the way. Now, all the small black dots that you see in this picture, both on the water and on the shore, are brine flies. And this was photographed last spring at Owens Lake in the Eastern Sierra. The range map shows just how widely distributed the California gull is compared to the other California birds that we've talked about. And as mentioned, they breed along the inland lakes and rivers and spend their winters along the coast. Now, looking at this map, you can see that the state of Utah is in the middle of their migration range. with a few full-time residents up around the Great Salt Lake. Now, why do I mention Utah? Why is this significant? Because in 1948, a plague of shielded back katydids, also known as the Mormon cricket, began devouring the crops of the Mormon settlers in Utah. When the California gulls returned to the area to breed, they started feasting on these katydids, saving the crops from complete destruction. A golden statue dedicated to these California gulls commemorates the event in Salt Lake City. And in recognition, the California gull was made the official state bird of Utah. Yeah, the state bird of Utah is the California gull. I think that's pretty cool. One species of gull that may be confused with the California gull is the Western gull. Now, the Western gull is a true coastal gull, and it has pink legs instead of yellow legs. And if you look at its bill, you'll see that it has only a red dot and no black markings, whereas the California will always have red and black, both at breeding and non-breeding. Another species that's easy to confuse with the California gull is the ring-billed gull. So we have the California gulls here on the left, breeding and non-breeding. We have the ring-billed gulls here on the right, non-breeding and breeding. I guess I should have switched those photos to make that a little more consistent. Anyway, I want you to take a look at two things: the color of the eye, which is yellow, versus the dark color of the California eye, and the fact that there is only black on the tip of the bill, and it's rather large and wide, and it truly is a band that goes around the bill, thus the name, the ring-billed gull. All right, do we have any questions before we go on to our next bird?
Yeah, I was just about to pop in. So we had a question. So they said that they may have missed it if you answered it, but how long do the California gulls live? I think they were thinking about all those different stages that they go through.
Yeah, actually I was reading that one of the oldest ones was 28 years old.
Wow.
So they are a long-lived bird. Yes, they are. They're not like the little songbirds that typically have a life expectancy of around 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Impressive. All right.
I don't have the average age. I just read that one statistic about the oldest one that was, these birds were banded as babies typically, and then they were either seen or photographed or sadly found dead, and the band was recovered, and they figured out how old the bird was. Yeah.
Very neat. All right. Thank you.
Sure. All right. Let's talk about bird number 6. Bird number 6 is the first of our endangered species, and it's the California Nat Catcher. Now, this petite little bird flicks its long, narrow tail up and down while it's hopping through the coastal sage scrub. The thing on this tail I want you to notice is it just has this really fine edging in white. We're going to use that field mark in just a moment to compare it to a couple of its close lookalikes. So males like this one are gray with a black cap in breeding season. They have a very small range within the United States with a very specific habitat, and that's coastal sagebrush. They are not seen at the Botanic Garden, but can be seen nearby at Benelli Regional Park. Because they are so tiny, sometimes it's easier to listen for their song, which is an almost cat-like mew, and then you can scan for movement in the area where you heard them. So let's take a listen to the California Nat Catcher.
California Nat Catcher.
Did anyone hear the wren tit in the background? Oh,
California Nat.
oh yeah, I know. She's going to say that every time. All right. The female is distinguished from the male by her overall gray color and the thin white eye ring around her eye and the brown washing on her wings. Now, non-breeding males look very much like this. They lose their black cap and they look a lot like the female, except they have a little less brown on their wings. Now, this is the first of our two birds named California that are federally endangered. Until the late 1980s, this bird was regarded as a local form of the black-tailed gnatcatcher. And with its recognition as a full species, with its recognition as a full species, it also became an endangered species because of its limited habitat along the California coast, which sadly is being taken over by housing tracts and other developments. So here's the range map and the type of habitat that these birds love. They live in coastal sage scrub, which is a low shrubby habitat that is also home to many other specialized animals and plants. So by making this bird an endangered species, we actually are preserving the entire habitat, not just the bird. They range from Southern California to Southern Baja California in Mexico. They generally occur below 1,600 feet in elevation, but sometimes occur at higher elevations where that scrub habitat is available to them down in Mexico. They forage insects by moving around actively in the shrubs and low trees. Now here is a male in breeding plumage, and he was photographed by Rod Higbee at Benelli Park. Now, despite their small size, the California gnatcatchers mob potential nest predators, birds that are even up to quadruple their size, such as California scrub jays, cactus wrens, and greater roadrunners, all of which are their neighbors at Benelli Park. Now, the adults often remain together in pairs throughout the year on permanent territories. Now, here's a female, also photographed by Rod at Benelli, and she's got some nesting material in her bill. The nests are built in a low, dense shrub, usually less than 4 inches above the ground. The male and female both build the nest, although the male does the majority of the work. The nests usually contain 4 eggs that are bluish white and finely dotted with reddish brown spots. Incubation is by both parents and lasts about 2 weeks. While they're incubating the eggs on the nest, they sit so low that apparently all you can see is the top of their heads and the tip of their tail. I have not been fortunate enough to actually see a California gnatcatcher on the nest. So here are some lookalikes for the California gnatcatcher. As mentioned earlier, the California gnatcatcher used to be considered a variety of the black gnatcatcher over here on the right, which has much more extensive white outer tail feathers than their California cousins. There are also vocal differences between the black-tailed gnatcatcher and the California gnatcatcher. Those cat-like mews that you heard in the recording of our California bird, well, the black-tail, they have more staccato and harsh calls. Nothing as pleasant as that little cat-like mew. Our other local gnatcatcher is the blue-gray gnatcatcher. That's the guy here in the middle. Now, the males lack the black cap of the California gnatcatcher, and their bodies are definitely a blue-gray, not a dark gray, like the California gnatcatchers. And both sexes, the males and the females, have much more extensive white on the outer tail than either the California gnatcatcher or even the black-tailed gnatcatcher. And the eye ring of the blue-gray is quite a bit more prominent as well. So these two definitely have overlapping ranges, but fortunately they look quite different. And this guy is really quite a bit east of us out in the deserts. One of the best places to see them is actually out at the Salton Sea. So here's a fun fact for you. Did you know that California gnatcatchers have never been observed bathing in standing water? Instead, they clean their feathers using water that collects on leaves. And the water can have a couple of different sources. It can be from rain, or it can even be the condensed fog along the coast collecting on the leaves that they rub themselves against and take their little bath. All right, bird
Can I
number
ask a
7.
quick question before
Oh, sure.
we go on
Oh,
to
I'm sorry.
It's
Yes,
actually
please.
my own question, so forgive me. I'm actually just curious. So why would you find them at Benelli but not here at the Botanic Garden? They're not too far away from each other.
No, it's the amount of coastal sage habitat at Benelli versus the garden. The garden has a lot more tall trees, and there are spots in the garden that have coastal sage. It's just not large enough to support them. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if one popped in periodically, perhaps a young one looking for new territory. But in terms of establishing a territory and breeding, Benelli is the better choice, just because of the sheer acreage.
Wonderful. All right, thank you. I was
Okay.
curious.
Oh, that's a good question. It's a good question because it is, relatively close by.
Mhm.
All right. Maybe nobody's extended him a formal invitation yet. I don't know. All right. Bird number 7, the spectacular but critically endangered California condor, is the largest bird in North America. These superb gliders travel widely to feed on the carcasses of deer, pigs, cattle, sea lions, whales, and other animals. The pairs nest in caves high up on cliff faces. The population fell to just 22 birds in the 1980s, but I'm happy to report there are now over 300 free-flying birds in California, Arizona, and Baja California, with another 200 in the captive breeding program. Despite their amazing recovery, lead poisoning remains a severe threat to their long-term prospects. Let's listen to the grunts, hisses, and growls of the California condor. Pretty interesting, huh? It's definitely not a pleasant bird song for sure.
It sounds like a pig.
I know, and there was one point where it almost roared like a lion. I was like,
Amazing.
what the heck is that? Yeah, yeah. So California condors have been reintroduced to the mountains of both southern and central California, over here in the Arizona, Utah, Nevada area, basically the Grand Canyon area, and down here in Baja California. The California condors, as I mentioned, they nest on cliff faces in remote locations that are very hard to access, and they travel very widely in search of food. If you're within the range of the California condors in Southern California, which would be inland from the city of Ventura in the Sespe Wilderness, or on the northern coast here around Big Sur or the Pinnacles National Monument, which is just inland from there, or if you're in the Grand Canyon area, be sure and keep your eyes peeled for these large, dark, soaring birds. Study them closely and make sure that they don't teeter like a vulture. A vulture has a flight pattern that kind of rocks and teeters like this. And make sure that they aren't look closely at their size and relative proportions to make sure that they're not a large hawk or an eagle or even a small plane. Yes, even small planes have been mistaken for California condors. And if you look closely, you want to make sure that you look for that wing tag. In this case, a colored numbered wing tag. So this is yellow number 51. And in this case, you can also see the antenna of the transmitter that is attached to the wing tag so that they can monitor their location at all times. The California condors can soar hundreds of miles in one flight as they are looking for their dead carrion to feed on. They pair off during breeding season and are monogamous. They share nesting duties, which nearly equally, and they stay together throughout the year. They lay a single off-white egg, which is incubated by both sexes for 56 days. That's a long time. Now the pair trade places incubating the egg. They trade off about every 1 to 5 days. And after hatching, the parents share the duty of bringing food to their offspring. Young condors are capable of flight at about 5 or 6 months after hatching and may remain dependent on their parents for at least another 6 months. This long period of dependence means that the whole nesting cycle takes more than a year. So after successfully raising one young, the condors must skip a year or skip a nesting season before trying again. They have one of the slowest rates of reproduction of all North American birds, which has made their recovery program especially challenging. This, by the way, is a juvenile condor with the black head and the lack of full white under the wings. Condors are highly social at the roosting, bathing, and feeding sites, and individuals actually recognize each other. Condors soar very slowly and stably. And they average about 30 miles per hour in flight, but can attain speeds of over 40. It takes them about 16 seconds to complete a circle while they're soaring. By comparison, a bald eagle or a golden eagle takes about 12 to 14 seconds, and our very common red-tailed hawks, they circle about every 8 to 10 seconds. So it's a very slow and deliberate flight. At carcasses, such as this one on the beach, California condors dominate over other scavengers, but they tolerate other birds, and they usually feed in groups. Now, the exception is when a golden eagle shows up. Although the condor weighs about twice as much as a golden eagle, the superior talons of that golden eagle command respect. Condors locate carcasses with their keen eyesight, not their sense of smell like a turkey vulture. And what they look for is a number of scavengers around the carcass, like in this picture here. But what I really want to draw your attention to in this picture is the 1, 2, 3 condors compared to the 1, 2 turkey vultures. And condors are massive. They are 46 to 52 inches in length. That's over 4 feet. In length of their wingspan is 109 inches. That's 9 feet. By comparison, a turkey vulture has a wingspan of less than 6 feet. Early in the pandemic, we told everybody stay 1 turkey vulture's distance away from each other, for that 6-foot social distancing. But a condor's wingspan is 9 feet. And condors are also very wary of humans while they're feeding, which is probably why they don't use roadkill as a food source. Let's take a little closer look at the differences between a condor and a turkey vulture, because they are often confused. And also size can be tricky to judge at a distance. And you're rarely going to have them side by side like in that previous picture for a comparison. So condors, as I mentioned before, are very large and have these broad wings, like big old rectangles just attached to the body of the bird. And they have these especially long fingertip feathers on each tip of their wings. What you might call the meaty part of the wing is white on a black background of primary and secondary flight feathers. The turkey vulture is actually the opposite. The meaty part of its wing is black on a white background of primary and secondary flight feathers. Their fingertipped wings, not nearly as long and dramatic as the condor. And the turkey vulture's wings are narrower as well. Oh, and again, I want to emphasize that difference in wingspan, 9-foot wingspan versus 6-foot. Although these photos look very similar in size, that's not what they look like in nature. Also look at how the wings are carried. This condor is flying with its wings relatively even with its back. Only the very tips of its finger feathers, if you will, are turned upwards. Now, the turkey vultures tend to carry their wings in a V shape. And earlier when I talked about their teetering, and this is pretty easy to remember, just think of V for vulture. So the turkey vultures also have wing tags. So I mentioned earlier that it was a good idea if you're thinking you had a condor to look for that wing tag. But I want to caution you, because here in Southern California, a number of turkey vultures also have tags. So just because you see a tag on a large black bird's wing, don't assume it's a condor. And the other, of course, major difference is their range. Currently, the nearest or closest condors to us are up in Ventura County. So there you have them. The 7 birds called California. From the tiny California Nat Catcher weighing less than 1/3 of an ounce to the California Condor weighing over 21 pounds. From the dramatic colors and patterns of the California Quail to the nearly solid plain brown of the California Towie. I think you'll have to agree that, like the state, California birds are both diverse and beautiful. And because of that diversity, it's hard for me to imagine a single bird named for our state, as is the case in 8 other states. So it feels appropriate that there are 7 birds named California. As a native Californian, giving a class for the California Botanic Garden, California's only native plant garden, I hope this class was both fun and informative for you, and that you can say, yep, California Botanic Garden was indeed the perfect place to learn about California birds. Any more questions, Jennifer?
Right, yay! Thank you so much, Tina. That was wonderful. Yes, I do have a question, and I'm not sure if you were going to have the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyway. So they asked, do you have any idea how many birds have the Latin name Californicus? So not just the common name, but like the Latin name. So you said there's 7. I bet there's.
Oh, we'd have to run through the slides real fast. I think it was 4 of the 7.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did not put their Latin names in my written script, so I can't look at my notes. I have to look at the pictures. But I noticed that not every bird had a Latin, species name ending in Californicus. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it was 4 of the 7. Well, those Latin names come from lots of different things, and I was trying to remember now where. I remember reading that the California Towie, there was a feature, perhaps it was even the coloration around the eye or something, and that has the Latin word for that is their last name, so to speak, versus California.
Yeah, they get named after all kinds of things.
Good question. Who asked that one? That was a good question.
Yeah, we had a comment that says, thanks, Tina and Cal BG, great program. We had another comment, which was, this was great. Tina is amazing, and you are. One more question. Which of these birds would you be most likely to see just in like a suburban neighborhood? So I think they're asking like, don't go out into the world if you're just staying at home. Which of these birds? The
scrub jay and the California Towie.
Scrub jay and California Towie. Okay.
Right, because they have adapted very well to suburban neighborhoods. And so as long as there are some shrubs and there's a little bit of leaf litter under the shrubs, they're going to be happy. In fact, in the intro to the Towie, I had mentioned that if you live in California, you probably will see this bird as you're walking your neighborhood or even in your own backyard. And especially if you have any oak trees in the neighborhood, because these guys love their acorns. And so you're going to see those too. The California gull can be seen anywhere in California, but typically flying overhead. But check out your parking lot gulls. Check out your high school football field gulls. I wondered at one point if the California gulls that we see occasionally flying over the garden aren't staging at the high school football fields. But now the field is AstroTurf. And so they would have less reason to go there because they couldn't forage on.
Why do they love football fields so much? I've noticed that too, like high schools. You see them at high schools. That's right.
Yeah. There must be something on the lawns that they're eating.
All right.
Some little bug or something like that, And then probably the next most likely ones to be seen if you're in any kind of chaparral habitat would be the quail and the thrasher. The Nat Catcher, it's an endangered species. There aren't that many. They're a little bit more sparse, but if you're in the right habitat and you listen for that call, you'll hear them. And then of course, the hardest one to see would be the California condor. And that is on my bucket list of birds to see, not in captivity as I have at the zoo, but out in the wild.
That's a great one.
Yeah. So Jennifer, I want to thank you again for asking me to be part of Bird Month at the garden. And in my introduction, I mentioned that the Great Backyard Bird Count. And I just want to emphasize that it's going on right now and that this is sponsored by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, by Audubon, and by Birds Canada, and that you can participate. There's still time. You can go outside or even look through your window and count birds for as little as an hour or from now until the end of the count, which is midnight tomorrow night. So just go to birdcount.org for all of the details. I had 21 different species of birds in my yard yesterday. That was kind of fun. Today, I haven't had quite as many because I've been prepping for this little presentation and haven't been outside looking as much. All right. And lastly, if you would like to learn more about the Pomona Valley Audubon Society, you can find us on the web at pomonavalley.audubon.org. Very simple. And if you enjoyed my program today, then you're going to love our monthly Zoom meetings. So to get on the email distribution link for our meetings, which occur on the first Thursday of each month at 7 p.m., be sure and email us at pomonavalley.audubon@gmail.com. The nice part about Zoom meetings is that we've been bringing in speakers from out of our area, even out of state, that have a specialty that is of interest to our members. So once again, Jennifer, I want to say thank you, not just for having me, but also for sharing a few of your bird photos from the garden. It seemed only appropriate to use a few photos from the garden. Most of the photos and audio recordings in this presentation are from my camera. birdpixel.com, allaboutbirds.org, Audubon's online field guide, The Bird Songs of California by Jeffrey Keller. And I also used Wikipedia and classroom clip art for the Utah State Bird Story. Additional information I gathered from the Sibley's Field Guide to Birds of Western North America. Here we go. All my credits have been given now.
All right. Thank you again, Tina, so much. We really, really enjoyed having you here. And thank you for making, Bird Month actually at the garden got a little bit shut down since we've been closed for the windstorm. So we were so happy that you were able to do this with us, and we were able to still get everybody out there thinking about California birds.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again for having me. Greatly appreciate it.
And thanks to all of you who joined us today. As I mentioned at the beginning, we did record this. So if you missed any parts of it or anything like that, I'm going to be sending out a link just as soon as we get it edited and posted. So keep an eye out for that and let us know if you have any questions or comments. All right, so we hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.